Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode. Today our guest is Art Pregler with AT&T. Art is the director of network engineering for AT&T. He's responsible for implementing key telecom programs and oversees AT&T's drone program, which includes terrestrial robots and autonomous systems. And that's exactly why we invited Art to join us today. We wanted to talk to him about a lot of the things he's working on that most of us have no idea that AT&T is working on, and that's specifically around their work with robots, drones, and other autonomous systems. So, most of us think of AT&T and T and we think about our cellular phone service or internet service. So this is going to be a fun one to learn about some of the cool stuff Art and his team are working on. So thanks for joining us, Art.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, perfect. Art. So this is an amazing and evolving subject, autonomous vehicle, autonomous, I guess, platforms. Give us a little bit of the background on how you got started in this category in these projects.
Well, we AT&T got started in this category because our foundation is connectivity, and we saw an opportunity and a need in that space. So drones obviously need connectivity to communicate and integrate with each other. Also, we saw that as an opportunity to provide connectivity from drones to users on the ground. Same with terrestrial platforms. Connectivity is at the heart of it. Being able to connect these devices into network and have them work together, communicating with each other.
So one of those autonomous terrestrial systems that you guys have developed is robots, terrestrial robots. So let's start there. Tell us, what exactly are we talking about here, and why terrestrial robots?
Sure. So yeah, there's several different types of platforms, but most specifically, and where we're furthest engaged is on robotic dogs. So think of this as like a dog, but a robot. The purpose of these for the industry is to put them into places where you don't want to put people. And so these are sensor platforms. You can put radiation detection, chemical detection, biological detection, put them into places where you don't want people in there, where people could be harmed if they're subjected to these substances. So then the dogs can go in, they can sense that environment, they can navigate that environment, they can help remediate what's going on in that environment. And then again, with the AT&T perspective, it's providing connectivity to get that data back to users that can then take action.
So is this using the public AT&T cellular network, or is there other networks that are being used with these systems?
Yeah, it's both the public commercial network, and it's also FirstNet. So providing these services to first responders, to public safety agencies. So particularly when you're talking about like bomb disposal, or even these dogs can sense fentanyl. So they have value in that case. They can, if for search and rescue, they can go in and look for bodies that are potentially buried in rubble after some type of natural disaster. So they have ground penetrating radar. There's cadaver sensors. There's so many different uses for this technology.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Are there some specific events you can talk about where these have been utilized in the recent history?
Sure. Yeah, we have them at about a dozen military bases where they perform perimeter security, flight line security. So they're fully autonomous. Again, working on our network, they get up, they'll walk routes looking for anomalies. If they see anomalies, they'll report it to security police so that they can engage. If they don't see anything when they're done with their routes, they'll return to their kennels, and then they'll charge themselves. They'll recharge themselves so that they can go back out on another run. And all of this is done completely autonomous without people managing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I like the word sensor platform because in the robotic dog, I was trying to get my mind around robot, but sensor platform makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can actually use it for ground penetrating radar, and since it's autonomous, you can actually program it to do a grid perfectly to utilize that technology. Correct?
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct. Yeah. Yeah. You can either put in waypoints and pre-program a route so that they can that they can walk that same route each time, or you can give it an endpoint or a mission and then have the dog figure out how to get there and figure out how to navigate obstacles along the way. AT&T, we have a patented solution called Geocast, and that's exactly what that does. It allows the robot to understand the area that it's in and make decisions on how to get from one point to another and navigate any obstructions along the way and communicate, work with other dogs, say like as a pack of dogs, or working with drones, even having the drones and the dogs coordinate our mission together.
Are there examples where maybe some of our listeners might have had an opportunity to see these in the general public versus outside of a military application?
So first responders are starting to get into the space of using these dogs. I'll be working with a bomb squad at an airport here in about a couple of weeks to demonstrate the capability. In the past, a lot of bomb squads have used tracked vehicles to deal with the explosive devices or suspicious packages. And after testing, we've concluded that the quadrupedal ground vehicle, which is basically what a dog is, can navigate terrain more successfully than these tracked vehicles. So, not that most of your listeners have been in areas where there are bombs, but there are instances. They're starting to see instances in the public safety arena also where these types of dogs are being used.
For some reason, I thought I saw somewhere, and I might be mistaken, that they might have been either on display or actually used at the most recent Super Bowl. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. We were there at the Super Bowl with our drones and our dogs, and we did have the CBRN unit. So that CBRN stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear detection. So we had the sensors on the dogs, and the dogs were ready to engage if anything catastrophic happened during the Super Bowl. So yes, the dog was there.
Hey, real quick, a quick word of thanks to today's sponsor, Vertex Innovations. For over 17 years, Vertex has been building the nation's wireless and broadband networks. Providing project management, network engineering, and construction oversight are just some of the ways Vertex helps their clients. So if you're looking for more of a partner to help you with your wireless network designs, construction, implementation, or operations, reach out to Vertex. You can find them at vertex-us.com. That's VERTEX-US.com.
When you think about, I guess, robotics or in an environment where humans are not there, does the drones augment intermittent connectivity? Because I imagine some of these circumstances, when they're if they're out in the wilderness, we have intermittent connectivity there. And so does the drones augment the dog to provide?
Correct. Yeah. A couple of uses for the dogs and the drones to work together. One is allowing the dogs to have a better sense of the environment around it. So the dogs have obviously a ground level view, but if they get into an area with tall grass or they need to see beyond some visual obstructions, the dogs can launch a drone. The drone can then get better eyes on the scene and provide that information back to the dog. So that's one use case between the dog and the drone. Also, dogs can be connectivity platforms. So like a Wi-Fi hotspot or cellular hotspot, providing connectivity in an area and then launching a drone to expand that connectivity.
That's kind of a good segue to the drones. Let's talk more about the drones. And when we say drones, I mean, drones can mean a lot of things, right? So I think what you're alluding to there is basically a flying device, a flying autonomous system that is being used to add additional cellular coverage in an area. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. We refer to them as flying cows. So in this case, cell on wings instead of cell on wheels. And so these are essentially flying cell towers. So yes, we can launch one of these drones in an area and provide instant connectivity. So your device, your handset, wouldn't even know that it's talking through a drone. You would just assume it's talking to the nearest cell site or nearest cell tower, but in fact, that the data is going through a drone and then into the AT&T network.
Take us through how exactly that works, because we've had a lot of episodes educating our customers on the need for example, we have an episode called Wireless Needs Wires, right? And how we're deploying all of this fiber to all these cell sites so that the cell site can connect to the network. We talk a lot about things for, power and how we have to get power to a site. So help our listeners understand how the heck you can have a cell site flying in the air on a drone and be connected to the rest of the world and have power and all those good things.
Yeah, so there are quite a few solutions in this space that we have available, but our simplest solution is a tethered flying cow. So we have a drone flying in the air up to 400 feet, and it has remote radio heads on it and antennas. So just like a cell tower has remote radio heads and antennas, that the drone has that as well. So your signal from your phone goes up to the antennas, into the radios, and then down the tether. So the tether is providing power to the drone so that the drone can remain aloft for several days at a time without landing. But it also has a couple of fiber connections running through that tether. So that the data goes down the tether into baseband units on the ground, VPN routers, and then into whatever type of backhaul we have available back into our network. So we can use satellite, we can use microwave, free space, optics. There's a lot of different ways to get that solution or that data back into our network. Even fiber, if there's functioning fiber in the area where we deploy. We also have a generator there to power this whole system, or we can tap into commercial power if that's available.
Wow. I mean, I definitely see the use case with hurricanes, devastating hurricanes where all of the communications out. You just roll this in on a truck, you tether it up, and now you have coverage. Like, what kind of coverage would a drone do? I mean, is it 5 miles, 10 miles? Is it hundreds of miles?
Yeah, it varies depending on a lot of conditions. So in our best case scenario is a flat desert environment with minimal vegetation, actually no vegetation. And in that case, we can get up to the 270 square miles of connectivity from a flying cow at 400 feet. But then as you introduce rolling hills, as you introduce vegetation, buildings, that all of these other obstructions that absorb RF energy, that coverage area comes down considerably.
Well, are the drones like synchronized with other flying cows so that you could continue to extend coverage into more rural applications? Or
yeah, the flying cow is essentially a node on the network. It's another cell tower, so it needs to be integrated into the network just as you integrate any other cell tower. So yes, you have handoffs between the drones and other drones. You have handoffs between the drones and other cell towers. It functions just like a regular cell tower in the network.
And you, at the beginning of talking about the flying drones, you alluded to the fact that these flying cows, cells on wings, are one of a stable of these types of solutions you have. Talk a little bit more. I'm trying to imagine what the heck else could there be?
So in addition to tethered flying cows, then we have untethered flying cows, and then that becomes more complex because when you cut that tether, now you have to provide power to that drone, and you have to get the wireless signal from the drone back to the network. And so then in that case, then you have front haul solutions to wirelessly transmit the data back into the network. And then also you have to get power to the drone. There's a couple of solutions there with either wireless power or solar power. So that there's alternative energy sources as well to power the drones.
And I seem to recall that you guys had some additional flying machines besides drones that you were also working with. Same concept, but
same concept. Yeah. So we have aerostats as well. So a blimp, I think of it that way. So we have tethered blimps where we can provide connectivity just in the same way as a drone. Benefit with that is a weight carrying capacity. So we can put macro cell tower equipment on there rather than small cell equipment. So then that increases the power output. So additional coverage and capacity, station time with these aerostats. And we have a couple of different ones available and in development.
And I'm imagining those can go to much higher altitudes as well.
They can't. Well, we fly them typically at 1,000 feet, and then again that's constrained by the tether height, the tether distance, because again we're running fiber and power through that tether. But yes, we can go higher altitudes.
And in all of these cases, I got to imagine there's a lot of behind the scenes logistics that you got to be on your game with, i.e., coordination with the FAA and aviation, for example, right? Can't have these things in the air where they're going to be at any risk of interfering with airplanes, for example.
Correct. And each type of solution has its own regulatory environment. So yes, so for Part 101 for the aerostats, Part 107 for the drones up to 400 feet. If we go into higher altitudes with heavier drones. And then that puts us into part 60. And there's part 135 if you're carrying payloads. So it can get complex, I suppose, in the regulatory environment, depending on what we're doing, how we're doing it, what we're carrying.
All of these various part references you're making for our listeners, basically, these are just various regulatory processes that the FAA makes you go through depending on the circumstances.
Correct. Yes. And then also getting the drones certified to operate in those environments, having the pilots certified to operate in those environments. Yes. There's a lot involved.
Yeah, pretty amazing. AT&T is definitely a front runner, and with FirstNet and now these type of applications just enable, our community to be better connected, be there for emergencies, and do those things. So do you guys have other things you're working on in the future, along these lines, or just where do you stand with that?
Sure. Yeah. No, we have additional solutions in development. For example, a high altitude flying cow. So this would be a drone flying at 60,000 feet and remaining airborne for several months at a time. Again, providing connectivity in that particular solution. The wings are solar panels, solar collectors, so which power that the drones are enabled to stay up that long. And then this would be up above commercial traffic. And then again, providing connectivity to a very wide area on the ground. One of the strengths benefits of a flying cow is that the altitude that it flies propagates a wider coverage area. As you go up in altitude, you go wider in that coverage area. And so LTE 5G being line of sight, it translates to a good solution using drones to provide connectivity.
So when you think about that, we've talked a lot about the fact that in urban areas, when these networks were launched back in the late 80s, early 90s, that we would launch a city the size of Seattle or Denver with, a handful of cell sites really tall that covered a large area. And then as these networks matured, the sites had to get smaller, and we've got in the orders of thousands or tens of thousands of node locations in a city that size now. Tell me a little bit about the trade-offs on these different applications, because obviously if we fly a drone at 1,000 feet over a large metropolitan area, that maybe creates some problems within the network in terms of covering too big of an area. So I'm imagining that these applications for the higher flying cell on wings or blimps or what have you probably are more rural in nature and or a unique type of application that's maybe different than the traditional cell site is providing to customers?
Sure. So yeah, the way you described it for the macro network, for the terrestrial network, works exactly the same way for the flying cows. So typically when we deploy to a disaster area, for example, we'll work with our RF engineers, and they'll tell us the location that they would like us to fly, where there is a dead spot. For example, if a hurricane comes through and wipes out the infrastructure, that they'll tell us to deploy to a certain lat long, and they'll also tell us a certain altitude to fly to ensure that our drone integrates well with the neighboring cell sites. So although we can fly at 400 feet, sometimes we're told to fly at 150 feet so that we don't interfere with the surrounding cell sites. And so we have smooth handoffs. So it works exactly the same way. And also you're correct in the rural applications for the higher altitude drones. So those are intended to serve more rural areas, more remote areas where there isn't a lot of network deployed underneath there.
And so, all the rage these days is about artificial intelligence, and these kind of applications, and back to, the sensor platforms pulling so much types of data. Do you guys have plans to integrate into the new AI solutions that are being developed in order to?
Yes, yeah. AT&T, we've been in the artificial intelligence field for quite a while, actually. Since the 1990s, we have over 130 patents in that area. And when we first started with drones back in 2014, that's exactly where we started, was with cell tower inspections, first providing videos and photos, and then moving to digital twins, and then introducing AI so we could identify defects and anomalies on the cell towers. So that was with a drone, from a drone perspective. And then with the robot dog perspective, the dogs also have the same type of intelligence built in. So the dogs have sensors, have cameras in all directions so that the dogs can see 360 degrees. And they use the video analytics to understand and make sense of the environment, and then also to report back anything they see. So earlier when I mentioned at these military bases where the dogs are doing perimeter security, they're looking for anomalies. Well, they use artificial intelligence to determine what an anomaly is, or if they're instructed to look for a certain type of image, they understand the image through AI and then report back if they see whatever it is they've been programmed to look for.
So we talked a little bit earlier, and you alluded to FirstNet. For those of our listeners that don't know what FirstNet is, we do have an episode, actually the episode we recorded prior to this one with you, which was with the CTO of FirstNet, Jeff Bratcher. But for those that may not have heard that episode yet, let's do a quick overview for our listeners of what FirstNet is. And then maybe you can tell us a little bit, Art, and I'll kind of give that overview. You can tell us a little bit about why FirstNet has been an important part, or how they may have played a role in the development of these systems. But before we get there, for our listeners, FirstNet is effectively a nationwide network that the federal government had developed for first responders, so that first responders could have a dedicated network for 4G LTE data and now 5G, so that they wouldn't have to share that network with the general public. So going back to 9/11, September 11th, with the World Trade Center, when that disaster happened, basically all the cellular networks were brought to their knees, and those first responders that were using cell phones were also unable to use their phones to communicate. So FirstNet has been developed. It's been in service for a while. FirstNet is actually partnered with AT&T. AT&T actually provides the network and has done the development hand in hand with the FirstNet Authority to bring that service on air. And so if you want to hear more about that, listen to the episode prior to this on FirstNet. But with that introduction, Art, kind of help our listeners understand, what role has FirstNet played in the development of these systems? And, do you see these systems still being in place, for example, in the same way they are if it was not for that FirstNet partnership?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, starting with the flying cows, FirstNet has a wide range of deployables, what are called deployables. So these are assets that are moved to the field to support public safety in any emergent situations. So typically these are sat colts. These are cell on light truck with satellite backhaul. They have CRDs. So these are rapid deployables. So these are ground units that provide connectivity in the field. Well, in addition to those types of assets, and there are many others, we have our flying cows. So they can also deploy rapidly and provide band 14 FirstNet connectivity to public safety agencies whenever called upon. So this is part of that FirstNet solution set that we provide this. In addition to that, we now have the ground robots, or the robot dogs, providing similar services. The various sensors are going into disaster areas. These dogs can even swim to provide to get to wherever they need to go into these hazardous, challenging areas to help first responders perform their missions.
Wow. Well, thanks, Art. It's amazing, and I'll tell you, I think I've told you offline several times in the time we've interacted that I'm jealous, and I would love to have your job. It's amazing. I just geek out every time we talk, and it's to understand all of the things going on beyond what we all assume AT&T is doing is I think quite innovative. So we appreciate your time and look forward to hearing and seeing more of the things that you and your team are working on and innovating.
Sure. No, pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, we look forward to a really bright future, a lot going on, a lot more on the horizon, and just have unlimited prospects for these various technologies we're working with.
All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.